Warzone has added a new mode, which is arguably the most surprising yet. Now, Call of Duty has added Warzone Bootcamp, and this isn't the gameplay that you're seeing in the background today, this is me suffering in your normal skill-based environment. But if you go and play Warzone Bootcamp right now, you can play against a few real players, but primarily artificial intelligence. Why am I telling you this, and why am I telling you about a mode that's built for new players getting into Warzone? Because you'd be surprised at the number of level 500 plus players who are sweating in AI lobbies against bots and new players. And you don't have to take my word for it. You can load up this mode whenever you want, and you'll see a handful of new players on fresh accounts being utterly beaten to shreds by people who are sweating at level 500 plus. And I don't think anything exemplifies more that the system for skill-based matchmaking on Warzone has really reached its breaking point. And in this video today, I'm going to be talking about those problems and the solutions that Call of Duty could very easily put into place that would make the system better for everyone. Because when we've reached a point that people are matchmaking against AI and killing new players, then the system clearly isn't working for anybody. It's punishing new players, it's punishing players in the middle, and it's punishing players at the top too. Now, before I begin, this video absolutely isn't going to be a content creator and streamer who is incredibly sweaty and has played at a top level, complaining about skill-based matchmaking or crying that his lobbies aren't easy enough. I agree with SBMM to an extent, because it's important to protect players who are new to the game, and it's also worth protecting players in the middle as well who are still finding their feet. But right now, I don't think the system is doing any of that. As a statistical average, the average KD in Warzone is around 0.8, meaning that if you're above 0.8, you're considered to be above average. And I often get questions from viewers and people commentating about why they end up in games with me and other streamers when they're only a 1 KD or a 1.1 KD. And that's because if you're somebody who is in the middle and somebody who isn't at the top end of the KD spectrum, but above average, you're probably punished the most by SBMM, because you're effectively being used as fill-out fodder for the rest of the lobbies, and you're being put into scenarios where you very easily could come up against free stack opponents who are all high level, all high KD, and working together. So people who are in the middle, above 0.8 KD, they're floating around the 1 KD mark, the 1.5 mark, arguably take the hardest beating from this matchmaking system because it throws them into whatever it thinks makes sense. And on top of that, we also have the natural problem of people trying to circumvent SBMM, people trying to use certain VPN providers, geofences, locking off certain regions. There's lots of attempts that have been made in the past to try and play against easier players. Call of Duty has recently started releasing white papers on how they handle matchmaking, and I recently did a video covering this, but there's a real conceptual misunderstanding here. Call of Duty is releasing these papers in an attempt to explain how their matchmaking system works to make people feel okay with the current status quo. They aren't releasing these white papers to introduce change. And there's been a real fundamental misunderstanding by Activision there, because they think they can explain away the problem, when in reality, people are upset with the status quo and want it to change. And the solution isn't just getting rid of SBMM and going to connection-based matchmaking. Because as much as people want that system, the reality is a large number of new players and a large number of players around the average medium are going to take an utter beating if that system comes to pass. The real solution, in my view, is to get more restrictive and more creative with the matchmaking systems available to them. You can split this solution into 3 categories: limited time modes, ranked systems, and restrictive matchmaking. The first one is limited time modes. When the essence of Warzone is no longer winning the game and the emphasis isn't on winning a match and it's on something wacky and different like zero gravity or shotguns versus snipers, you're creating a matchmaking experience that is focused more on the gameplay than it is on the outcome of that gameplay, which is why most limited time modes in my experience in Warzone have substantially less skill-based matchmaking. They just seemingly randomize the matchmaking and let people get on with it. And we haven't seen really any LTMs in Warzone so far. In the past couple of months since the release of the major Warzone 3 update, we have had 1 LTM for April Fools, 1 for Christmas, and we've had 1 LTM now before 20, and none of them have been particularly good or stuck around for very long. We don't see weekly LTMs like other games. We don't see monthly LTMs like other games. They come in random bits and bobs, and they don't shake up the gameplay system. We haven't had buyback solos, buyback quads, shotguns versus snipers, or even a traditional BR mode with ground loot only, and the only thing we've had other than that is third person. So at the moment in Warzone, you've effectively got a matchmaking pool for big map, which is basically just ranked all the time, because SBMM is always cranked as best as it can be, and you aren't rewarded for anything. So more LTMs are the first step to solving the problem with SBMM, because you can allow people to break up their gameplay into more fun limited time modes that will engage different audiences and interest different people. The second part of this is simply having ranked on big map and resurgence, and if you can't do both, put it on big map. The reality is that you would take away all of the sweaty players like me if you just had a ranked mode out on the large version of Urzikstan. I would not be playing any other mode but Urzikstan ranked if it was out in Warzone right now, and most people who are above an average KD and highly engaged in Warzone are exactly the same. And this worked really successfully during the later stages of Warzone 2, where if you played a casual game of trios or quads without playing ranked, all of the sweaty guys were on ranked. It was a much more loose system, it was much more casual, and the gameplay was much more open for the people who were playing there. People like me who could end up in lobbies with people above a 1 KD ended up being on one specific mode, and it takes us out of the equation. It sounds stupid, but if I'm being honest, sweaty players like myself are part of the problem. We are highly engaged with the game, and whilst we shouldn't be punishing players who are good at the game, or play lots of time, or invest lots of time into it, giving them an avenue to play against one another in a system that they're happy with is far better than leaving them in a public matchmaking pool. Because quite frankly, I don't care if I'm playing against the best players in the world, so long as I'm getting a ranking system for it. And people who are of my KD or in similar categories are competitive people who want competitive rank systems. But there's an evolutionary step to this as well, because the rank system in Warzone in my view doesn't work as it is, because it comes under the same problems of regular matchmaking. You end up with silvers, diamonds, and gold players playing against people who are slightly higher ranks like Crimson and Iridescent. And the solution to that is to introduce something like a H1Z1 bonus system, where if somebody who is in gold or platinum, for example, kills somebody in iridescent or top 250, they are awarded a bonus skill rating for doing so. If Call of Duty can shut down tools that allow you to identify who's playing in your game or ban people for using them very consistently, then you would have a perfect matchmaking system, where people play against the people who are roughly in their ranking system, and people who are of lower ranks who end up in those games as well get bonus points for taking out squads who are higher ranks than them, allowing them to elevate their own rank status to something more reflective of their own skill. So having a new rank system that takes people out of the equation is the second big thing. If you have LTMs and you have a rank system, as much as you're splitting the player base, you're isolating key individuals and key player groups who can end up playing different experiences and not feel at the mercy of the matchmaking system in front of them. And the final one for me is restrictive matchmaking. And this is something that's arguably a little controversial, but I think it's worth doing. I don't think new accounts should be able to play regular modes, and I don't think people like myself should even be able to matchmake into Warzone Bootcamp. Warzone Bootcamp should be a mode that is specifically for people who are under level 50, and you should have to play this mode until you reach level 50, or a certain level within a certain given criteria. This will allow new players to develop themselves in the game without the threat of somebody like me being in their lobby, and if Call of Duty is really intelligent, they can increase the computing power or activation of their anti-cheat within these lobbies as well to catch more accounts who are cheating on new accounts in this playlist too. It would allow Call of Duty to establish a trust rating for new accounts, it would allow them to detect people who are obviously rage hacking, it would allow new players an opportunity to play against other new players and artificial intelligence, and it would stop high-level accounts from being involved at all. Splitting the player base is naturally quite difficult, especially when you're already handling solos, duos, trios, quads across various different maps. But I would rather see less modes available and more variations like LTMs and ranked, than having all of these modes available where everybody feels like they're being punished by a system. As a final point to this video, I would almost really argue at this point that Call of Duty has more of a problem with its perception of its matchmaking than the actual matchmaking itself. People believe the system is rigged against them, and they're not going to read a 20-page PDF to feel otherwise. What Call of Duty needs to do is move towards these systems that I've mentioned, introducing bigger and wider playlists for more wider options of players, and allowing the matchmaking system to free itself up. Get the sweats playing ranked, get the guys who play once a week or once a month playing the LTMs, and then everybody else in between playing the other modes should have a more loose experience that feels more natural, and not like it's been giga-rigged against them against sweats. I think when we've reached a point where people are matchmaking into a bootcamp mode at level 500, level 600, and obviously fairly good players, then we're truly verging on the edge of madness, and for Call of Duty to shake the current status quo, it needs to do some pretty radical things. So folks, that's it for this video today. Let me know your thoughts and feelings in the comment section down below. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll catch you again in the next one.